It was 11:45 on a Tuesday night when I pulled into the driveway. The rain was hammering against the windshield, but through the blur I saw it. My life scattered across the wet asphalt, my clothes, my books, my laptop charger all soaking in the mud. My father Jeffrey stood in the open doorway, blocking the warmth inside. He didn't look sorry. He looked triumphant. "Space is for winners, Savannah," he shouted over the storm. "We are liquidating your room to build Alyssa a C-suite office. She actually has a future, you don't." Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I didn't even blink. I just looked at him, dissecting the moment like a bad line of code. My father expected a fight. He wanted the satisfaction of seeing me crumble so he could feel tall, but I wasn't going to give him the return on investment. I stepped past him into the hallway, water dripping from my coat onto the hardwood I had paid to refinish last summer. My mother Stacy was already in my room. She wasn't packing my things. She was measuring the wall space where my bed used to be. 72 inches, she muttered to herself, ignoring the fact that her daughter was standing there soaking wet. That should fit the mahogany desk perfectly. Alyssa needs the executive aesthetic if she is going to be taken seriously. I didn't say a word. I walked over to the closet, reached to the top shelf, and pulled down the single waterproof box containing my external hard drives and my birth certificate. That was the only capital I needed. I turned around and walked out. I stepped over the pile of my clothes in the driveway: jeans, blazers, the winter coat I bought when I was 22, and didn't look back. I loaded the box into the passenger seat of my car, got in, and locked the doors. The silence inside the vehicle was heavy, absolute, and cold. As I started the engine, I looked at the house one last time. The lights were blazing, warm and yellow, a perfect picture of suburban success. But I knew the truth. I knew why they were so cruel, why they needed to evict me to build a shrine to Alyssa's new job. It is a concept in economics called signaling theory, but in my family it was just the illusion of power from an empty wallet. Their arrogance wasn't a sign of strength. It was a defense mechanism for their own financial hollowness. They treated me like dirt because deep down they knew they were standing on a trapdoor and I was the only thing holding the latch closed. They needed to believe they were better than me because if they admitted they weren't, they would have to admit they were broke. I drove 3 blocks and pulled into the empty parking lot of a closed pharmacy. The rain drummed a steady rhythm on the roof. I didn't cry. I reached for my phone and opened my banking app. The screen glowed with the blue light of authorization. I navigated to the recurring transfers tab. There it was, the ledger of ghosts. The monthly mortgage transfer of $2,400 set to autopay for the last 3 years. The quarterly tuition payments to the university that Alyssa claimed gave her a full ride. The emergency fund transfer I sent whenever my mother mentioned the water heater was acting up. I had been the silent investor in their lifestyle, the venture capitalist keeping their ego afloat. They thought they were evicting a tenant. They didn't realize they were firing their chief financial officer. I tapped the mortgage transfer first. A dialog box popped up asking if I was sure. I didn't hesitate. I tapped confirm. Cancelled. Next was the utility bundle. Cancelled. Then the credit card payoff I handled for my dad. Cancelled. One by one, I severed the financial arteries that kept their delusion alive. I didn't feel guilty. I felt lighter. The transaction was complete. I put the phone down, put the car in drive, and merged back onto the highway. The rain was still falling, but for the first time in years the forecast looked clear. I checked into the penthouse suite of the Meridian at 2 in the morning. The night manager didn't ask for a credit card. He simply nodded, handed me a key card with a matte black finish and said, "Welcome home, Miss Vance." I didn't correct him. Technically, this hotel was part of the portfolio I acquired 6 months ago. I owned the sheets I was about to sleep on. I owned the view of the city skyline that glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I slept for 4 hours. When I woke up, the rain had stopped, but the storm on my phone was just beginning. I picked it up from the nightstand. 43 notifications. Not a single missed call from a lawyer, not a single apology. Just a stream of consciousness from a family that still believed they were the center of the universe. My mother asking where I put the Wi-Fi router password because Alyssa couldn't connect her iPad. My father demanding I send next month's mortgage transfer early because they were buying new ergonomic furniture for the office today. And then the kicker. A photo from Alyssa. She was standing in the middle of my old room now, stripped bare of my existence. She was holding a tape measure against the wall where my bookshelf used to be, wearing a smug grin. The caption read, "Finally getting the C-suite vibe I deserve. #bossbabe. #new beginnings." They weren't worried. They weren't even angry yet. They were just annoyed that the help had quit without leaving an instruction manual. They assumed I was sulking at a friend's house and would be back by the weekend to fix the internet. I ordered a double espresso from room service and walked out onto the balcony. The city air was crisp. I looked down at the streets below, thinking about the concept known as the chains of the survivor. People always ask why victims stay. Why I stayed for 3 years after I made my first million. Why I paid the mortgage on a house where I wasn't allowed to sit on the good furniture. It wasn't because I was weak. It wasn't because I was afraid. It was because I was gambling. I was betting my dignity against the desperate childish hope that if I just paid enough, fixed enough, endured enough, I would finally buy the one thing they refused to give me for free, their love. I thought if I made their lives perfect, they would have no choice but to see me. But looking at that photo of Alyssa standing in the ruins of my personal space, I realized the house always wins. They didn't love me less because I hadn't done enough. They loved me less because they needed someone to look down on to feel tall. My success would never make them proud. It would only make them hateful. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and hot. I opened my phone again. I didn't reply to the texts. I didn't send the password. I navigated to my contacts list and found the group labeled family. I pressed delete. The hope was dead, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to resurrect it. I went back inside, showered, and put on my tailored suit. The grieving period was over. It was time to go to work. The valet at Ether Tower didn't ask for my keys. He simply opened the door and murmured, "Good morning, Miss Vance." I walked into the lobby, the heels of my stilettos clicking a sharp, rhythmic cadence against the Italian marble. This building was my cathedral. 38 floors of glass and steel that I had built from a single patent application 5 years ago. To my family, I was the failure who fixed computers for cash and couldn't hold down a real job. To the NASDAQ, I was the majority shareholder of Aether Technologies. The contrast wasn't just stark. It was almost comical. Last night I had been evicted from a suburban bedroom because I took up too much space. Today I was walking into a boardroom to sign a $420 million acquisition deal. My assistant Marcus met me at the elevator. He handed me a tablet without breaking stride. The board was ready. The legal team from Omni Marketing was asking for a clause revision on the intellectual property transfer, but Marcus had already told them it was non-negotiable. "Good," I said, scanning the document. "If they want the payout, they accept the terms. We aren't buying them for their brand. We're buying them for their client list. Is the HR integration complete?" 90%. The personnel files were uploaded to our secure server at 6 a.m. I handed the tablet back. "I'll review them after the signing." We stepped into the elevator. As the numbers climbed 20, 30, 38, I felt the last remnants of the shivering girl in the driveway evaporate. This was the professional escalation. My family thought they had discarded me into the void. They didn't realize they had thrown me right back into my own kingdom. The signing took 20 minutes. The CEO of Omni Marketing, a man twice my age, shook my hand with a grip that was sweaty with relief. He was cashing out. I was digging in. I signed the documents with the same pen I used to journal my expenses in college. When I put it down, the company was mine. "Congratulations, Miss Vance," he said. "You have a hell of a team over there, especially your new hires. We just brought on a marketing lead who claims she's a prodigy. I think she'll fit right in with your culture." I froze. A cold, intuitive prickle ran down my spine. "Is that so?" I asked, my voice perfectly level. "What's her name?" "Alyssa Vance." Same last name, actually. No relation, I assume. I smiled. It was a shark's smile devoid of humor. "I'll look into her file personally." I walked back to my office, the corner suite with the view that cost more than my parents' entire subdivision. I sat down at my desk, which was made of reclaimed black oak, not mahogany. I logged into the secure server. I didn't need to search for the file. It was flagged at the top of the new hires list. I opened it, and there it was, the lethal discovery. I expected nepotism. I expected exaggeration. I didn't expect criminal fraud. Alyssa's resume was a masterpiece of fiction. Under education, she listed a degree from the University of Washington with a 3.9 grade point average. I knew for a fact she had dropped out junior year because she couldn't handle the vibes of Intro to Macroeconomics. She claimed she was the project lead on the Apex campaign 3 years ago. I stared at the screen, I was the one who built the Apex campaign as a freelance ghostwriter to pay for her car insurance. She hadn't just padded her resume. She had stolen my work, fabricated a degree, and forged transcripts. In the corporate world, this wasn't just a fire-able offense. It was cause for immediate termination with cause potential clawback of signing bonuses and a blacklisting from the industry. I sat back in my chair. My family had called me a burden. They had called me useless. But looking at this PDF, I realized the truth. Alyssa wasn't just a mean sister. She was a corporate liability, a ticking time bomb of incompetence and deceit that I had just purchased for nearly $500 million. I wasn't going to fire her because I was angry. I wasn't going to fire her because she threw my clothes in the mud. I was going to fire her because it was my fiduciary duty. I pressed the intercom button. "Marcus," I said, my voice calm, factual, lethal. "Get HR on the line. And tell the new marketing lead for Omni that the CEO wants to see her. Immediately." I sat in the silence of my office, my phone flat on the desk, watching the family group chat light up. I hadn't blocked them yet. I needed the intel. I needed to see the blast radius before the bomb even dropped. Alyssa was texting the group saying they wouldn't believe it, but the CEO of the parent company had just summoned her. Personally. On her first day, my mom responded instantly saying she knew it, that they probably realized Alyssa was too good for the marketing team and were offering her a VP role. My dad chimed in, telling her to show them who she was, to remember she was a Vance born for the corner office. I watched the messages scroll by, a real-time feed of their delusion. They weren't just arrogant. They were intoxicated by their own mythology. They honestly believed that competence was genetic and that the world owed them a promotion just for showing up. Alyssa sent a selfie from the lobby of my building. She was wearing a cream blazer that I knew cost more than my first car, holding a latte, looking bored and superior. She complained about the decor being cold and said she would probably suggest a redesign during the meeting. I minimized the chat and pulled up the security feed on my second monitor. I watched her walk past the reception desk. She didn't smile at the receptionist. She didn't say thank you to the security guard who held the gate open. She breezed past them like they were furniture. "She's in the elevator," Marcus's voice came over the intercom. "ETA, 2 minutes. "Send her in," I said. "And make sure security is on standby on the floor." I watched the floor numbers on the display climb. 20, 30, 35, 38. With every floor, her ego was inflating, rising toward a summit that didn't exist. She thought she was ascending to the throne. She didn't realize she was walking to the gallows. I stood up and walked to the window, turning my back to the door. I wanted her to see the view first. I wanted her to see the empire I had built, the city I had conquered, before she saw the face of the person who owned it. The heavy oak doors creaked open. "Hello," Alyssa's voice echoed in the cavernous space. It was confident, chirpy, the voice of someone who had never been told no. "But we definitely need to talk about the lighting in here. It's very dungeon chic." She walked further into the room. I could hear her heels on the floor. "So," she said, her voice getting louder, assuming familiarity with a stranger. "I assume you've seen my portfolio, or did my reputation just precede me? I have some ideas for the Omni merger that I think." I turned around. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. It sucked the air out of the room. Alyssa froze mid-step, her mouth still slightly open, her hand raised in a gesture of performed casualness. She blinked. Once. Twice. She looked at me, then looked around the room as if expecting the real CEO to jump out from behind a curtain. "Savannah," she whispered. The confidence drained out of her face like water from a cracked glass. She let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "What? What are you doing here? Did you get a job with the cleaning crew?" "You really shouldn't be in here. If security finds you—" "Sit down, Alyssa," I said. My voice wasn't loud. She stopped laughing. She looked at the desk. She looked at the nameplate. S. Vance. CEO. She looked back at me, and for the first time in 25 years I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She didn't sit. She stumbled backward a step. "No," she stammered. "No, this is a prank. Dad put you up to this, didn't he? You don't own this. I bought Omni Marketing at 9 a.m. this morning," I said, walking slowly toward the desk. "Which makes me your employer. Which makes this a performance review." I picked up the file from my desk and dropped it in front of her. The sound of the paper hitting the wood was like a gunshot. "Your resume," I said. "It's very impressive, especially the part about the Apex campaign." "I led that," she said quickly, her survival instinct kicking in. I was the lead strategist. Really, I leaned forward, resting my hands on the desk. Because I have the original invoices on my laptop. From when I ghost wrote that entire campaign for you because you were too hungover to open a PowerPoint. I have the metadata, Alyssa. I have the timestamps. Her face went gray. And the degree, I continued, relentless. University of Washington. Funny. I called the registrar an hour ago. You dropped out sophomore year. You don't have a degree. You have a fabricated PDF. You can't do this, she whispered, tears starting to well up, not tears of sorrow but tears of a child who got caught. I'm not humiliating you, I said. I'm firing you. You're jealous, she shrieked, the anger finally breaking through. That's what this is. You've always been jealous of me. Mom and Dad love me and you can't stand it. You built all this just to spite us. I didn't build this for you, I said. I didn't build this to spite you. I built this because while you were playing pretend I was doing the work. I looked her dead in the eye. This was the moment. The concept of true legacy versus perceived legacy. You wanted the job because of the title, Alyssa. You wanted the corner office and the blazer and the validation. You think legacy is something you're given because you're special. But I built this empire because of the work, because of the nights I didn't sleep, because of the problems I solved while you were buying awards online. I pressed the button on my desk. Security, I said. Escort Miss Vance from the building. She is trespassing. Savannah, please, she begged, the facade crumbling completely. Mom will kill me. I told them I got a promotion. Please don't do this. You fired yourself when you lied on the application, I said, turning my chair back to the window. Goodbye, Alyssa. 2 security guards entered the room. They weren't rough, but they were firm. They took her by the arms. As they dragged her out, she was screaming my name, screaming for our father, screaming that it wasn't fair. The heavy doors clicked shut. The silence returned. It was perfect. The fallout was nuclear. Within minutes of Alyssa being escorted out of the lobby, my phone began to vibrate against the oak desk. It didn't stop. I watched the screen light up with calls from my mother, then my father, then my mother again. I didn't answer. I didn't block them either. I let it ring, a distant buzzing soundtrack to the rest of my workday. I left the office at 7 p.m. The city was alive with lights, a sprawling grid of energy and ambition. I didn't go back to the hotel. I drove to the outskirts of the city, to a small, quiet overlook where I used to come when the noise of my family got too loud. I checked my phone one last time. There was a voicemail from my father. His voice was cracked, panicked. The tone of a man who had just looked at his bank account and seen the void staring back. Savannah, the mortgage payment didn't go through. The bank says insufficient funds. The renovation contractor is demanding a deposit for the office. Call me back. We need to fix this. We. The word hung in the air, pathetic and heavy. There was no we. There never had been. There was only them feeding and me bleeding. And now the vein was closed. I deleted the voicemail. Then I opened the banking app one last time. I transferred the remaining balance from the joint emergency account, the one I had funded entirely, into my personal trust. The balance on their side hit 0. In 3 months, the pre-foreclosure notices would start arriving. They would lose the house not because I took it from them, but because they had spent their future on a renovation for a job that didn't exist for a daughter who lied about her degree. They would have to sell the mahogany desk. They would have to sell the ergonomic chair. I stood on the edge of the overlook, breathing in the cool night air. I didn't feel happy. Happiness is a fleeting thing, a spike of dopamine. What I felt was peace. A deep structural stability that couldn't be shaken by rain or screaming voicemails. I had spent my life trying to find a seat at their table, begging for a plate, eating scraps. I looked out at the city, at the Aether tower glowing in the distance, a beacon of what I had created with my own 2 hands. I realized I didn't need their seat. I didn't need their table. I had built my own, and the view from here was spectacular. If you've ever had to build your own table because they wouldn't give you a seat, share this story. You are the CEO of your own life now.